And welcome back to the Survive Scale Soar podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy, and I get the opportunity to talk with great business owners across the country. We learn about what they're doing in their world, and from it, we're going to learn some lessons today that you can be able to apply both in business and life. On the show today, I have a great guest. His name is Scott Hack. He's out of Louisville, Kentucky, and he's the broker owner of Finish Line Realty. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Hey man, appreciate the opportunity to share with your audience.
I'm excited. I'm excited about what we're going to get to at the end. But before we get there, I want to talk a little bit about your journey. I think those that are listening, everybody starts out in real estate at some point. Sometimes it's a straight line to real estate. Sometimes there's some curves in the path. I found it quite interesting that you had a restaurant in Yellowstone. What got you doing that? And then we'll talk about the next step where you went from there.
Yeah, so I didn't own the restaurant in Yellowstone. I worked at a restaurant in Yellowstone, and then basically started off waiting tables, bartending, that sort of thing here in Louisville. And then I had a roommate at the time who said, "Hey, let's pack our bags and go out west and do a summer adventure." And that's what we did. And I worked in the park for about 4 months. And we spent 3.5 days working at the restaurant and roughly 3.5 days exploring the park and everything in Yellowstone and the Tetons, and made it up to Glacier a few times for a couple overnight trips. It's just, an adventure. I was younger, early 20s, and didn't have any responsibilities. It worked. After that summer was over, I came back and continued to work in the restaurant business, and eventually did open up my own restaurant, which was a pizza restaurant. So we had dine-in, delivery, carry-out, full bar, and kind of in the suburbs of Louisville where I now live. And I loved the restaurant business. I loved the interaction with people. And to be honest, I'm kind of an introvert, but that type of business, it forces you to have those interactions. So you're, kind of face to face, and it's also for the most part, it's one to one. So, you're having one conversation with one person. So it's kind of easier. But the reality of that business, and when I sold it and moved into real estate in 2008, is that labor was just really challenging. We had about 30 employees that were on the payroll, a lot of high school kids, seniors, a lot of college people, so a lot of part-time work. And every big concert, every big festival, every this, every that, people wanted to ask off and they want to go with their friends who are the people they know from work. And I was like, we can't have 50% of the staff take off for the same weekend. There won't be a restaurant to come back to. So ultimately, I needed to have a business that I could have more control over personally and not be reliant on other people. And so that's how I transitioned over to real estate. I had some familiarity with it. You and I were talking beforehand. My father is a residential home builder, custom builder, and my mom's a real estate agent as well and has been for about 40 years. So I had a lot of familiarity with that part of the business.
Yeah, I think it's one of the interesting things you shared and we related on was you'd go out to these home sites on the weekend and clean stuff up and work on it and pick stuff. And you just thought that was the norm. Tell me
That's
a little
right.
bit about that.
Yeah, when I was younger, my dad weekends, we'd go and I'd scrap out a house with drywall, or we were picking up bricks out of the mud, or carrying lumber for our deck to get something done. And I just thought that was kind of the normal that people did, worked on the weekends and did things. And I got into high school, got a little bit older, and like, oh, you didn't have to go carry lumber this weekend. So
Yeah. Yeah. My dad was a master plumber. So, the weekends for me were digging ditches out in the hill country with a pick rock. And I just thought that that was the norm. But I appreciate that because what lessons did you take from that and you're still utilizing today, even in your real estate business?
yeah, and it is interesting because my entire life, my parents have essentially been self-employed. So I don't know the life of someone that has to punch in and punch out, or that, has to ask their boss to get off work. I came from a family where both my parents were self-employed. My dad was my little league coach. They were there. We worked. He obviously worked a lot of nights and weekends. We scheduled things around when he had appointments. So if he had a client coming to the house to talk about building a house, that meant we had to clean the house up and be ready for his appointment. And, we might have dinner late that night. So that was kind of like the normal for me. And the same thing, like the conversations around the dinner table were about work. My dad's sharing about what he's doing, and my mom's sharing about the houses she was looking at. Of course, we're sharing about, I'm the oldest of three boys. So we're talking about our work, our school stuff, and probably annoying the crap out of our parents because I've got two girls. So I can't imagine what three kids did to my parents' mental state.
Yeah. Well, they it looks like they did a pretty good job, but I think there's something to appreciate there. And before we keep moving on, there's one other question I want to ask you. There's real estate agents out there today, and I coach some of those. I don't have any of those on my team because I don't allow it, but they're always looking for the easy way. And to me, it sounds like there was a pattern of behavior over your entire lifetime where work ethic was really important. Like you've got to work to get results.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that, like you were talking about, we are in an industry and we are in a business, specifically real estate, where you only eat what you kill. And if you don't kill something, then you don't eat. So you've got to go out there and you've got to do the work. And it doesn't just show up. You've got to do the activity for there to be results. I remember specifically when I started the pizza restaurant, my grandfather was also in the entertainment and hospitality business. He ran two bowling centers, and he had much bigger operations. He probably had 150 people between the two bowling centers that he was in charge of. And he was teasing me. He's like, "Congratulations! Like you're now your own boss. You get to work half days." He's like, "You get to pick what 12 hours you want to work." And
That's
he's
for sure.
exactly right. And some days there are times where you are working 12, 14, 16-hour days because that's what's required because you're either going to be the bottleneck or if you don't do it, it's not going to get it done. I'm in my training center today. Normally on Tuesdays between 10:30 and noon, we do a training and kind of go through my agents' problems, try to, give them some input on where I think things are going and give them some direction. And today I came in and I cleaned the bathroom and took the trash out. No one else is going to do it. So everything from the top to the bottom is my responsibility.
Yeah, I love that. And I heard you say you're the bottleneck. And how true is that? You know, most of the time we're getting in our own way with the decisions that we make and looking for that easy route. We are going to be the bottleneck in that case. So I appreciate you sharing that. So you were with Remax. You joined your mom. You were with Remax for about 3 years. I think she was there maybe 15 years in total with them. And you made the decision to go out and start Finish Line Realty. Tell me what made you jump from a national brand to an independent.
Well, Um, the longer answer there is probably being naive. I thought that I could do it better. When I was at the Remax office, there was top class. There was things were taken care of, staff, nice facilities, trainings that were being done. But I was also doing a lot of things that a lot of the other agents weren't doing. I was pretty heavy into online lead generation and building websites, that kind of direction. And it wasn't a lot of the tools weren't focused in that way. It was more of a sphere of influence type of setup versus a business that was kind of looking for new clients. And as a second generation real estate agent, a lot of my sphere also knew my mom, and they were definitely going to pick my mom over the new guy. So I had to go work with strangers, and that meant a lot of lead generation with people I didn't know. So what it came down to is I thought I could make better decisions about how I was spending my marketing money, as opposed to being at the franchise, which had a system, but I was paying into it and being told what system to use. So, branched off and started Finish Line. When I had my pizza restaurant, it was an independent brokerage or independent restaurant as well. We weren't a franchise. I think that deep down, that experience with my parents being self-employed, even my mom is at Remax today, actually still, even though she's there and being self-employed, I think that wanting and being like my own boss was something important to me. As I've progressed now, because the brokerage is coming up on 13 or 14 years old, now my why kind of shifts a little bit. why I have the brokerage. Because I think that now sometimes I start thinking about making decisions about the next generation. Like my legacy for the brokerage, will this be a brand that my kids can take over and will this give them a head start in the business now for, that I've got gave them a 30-year head start on the brand and the website and everything else. So I think that that was one of the other kind of things that shifted my focus, but it probably wasn't originally.
Yeah, and I love that. I love the honesty there in that you said you were just naive. You
Yeah.
thought you could do it better, and that happens a lot. There's a lot of people that say, "I'm going to go get my broker's license, start one," and especially on the coaching side of my business, if they ask me that, I'm like, "You might." I'm not telling you no, but I want you to think through it, and maybe that was to your advantage to be naive and to step into it and grow that. And like you said, now it's turned into something that it's not just a business for you, but it's now going to be a legacy for you. So that's amazing. Now you do online. I've got people listening here that are probably across the board. Some are very techy. Some might not even know how to turn their computer on. If somebody wants to start maybe a lead generation lever in their business of online leads, where's one place for them to start?
Well, like you said, there's a whole gamut there of things to do, but you've got to have a domain name of some sort. So I think that's probably the best place to start. And I could honestly talk for hours about domain names. I own about 300. Some of them are specific to my business, some of them are speculative. I actually buy and sell a few a year. And I think that what you need to concentrate on is either what's a geo-rich keyword domain, so something that's going to be specific to your area, that's keyword, and or something that has an embedded command. So, find a search like buy homes in your city, your zip code, your state, or my main domain is louisvillerealestate.com. And that's one of the ways that I've been able to grow my brokerage is by having that domain and that brand power. All of my agents get an email address that's at louisvillerealestate.com. So I think that has a lot of power. It's easy to say. Of course, if you're in the area or you're looking in the area, you're already familiar with Louisville, and then real estate. There's probably only two or three other domains that might have the same real punch to them for remembering them. Um, I I would say that if you can't find something that has a geo-rich domain with keywords in it or a embedded command. The other one would be your name because that can be your brand. I realize that some people like Jim Miller probably have trouble finding their domain, but finding something with their name in it, and then the last one would be something that is basically a brand. So what I have with Louisville Real Estate and a lot of my other domains are what's called an exact match. So they are the exact words that someone would type into the search engine. But Google has been giving a little bit more of their algorithm shift towards just a brand name. So I don't want to say it out loud because when you say it three times, it gets bigger. But the big
Beetlejuice,
Z,
Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice. Yep.
yeah. Um, when you have something like that word didn't exist. It's a brand. So finding something that can be your brand, I think is another option to give people. Just whatever it is, obviously the shorter it is, but you want to find a .com domain that you own and that you can invest in.
So what you're talking about is domain authority, finding the right one and then creating content around that.
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be content. I was talking to a gentleman the other day, and we were talking about like lead magnets and social ads. So you can go to Facebook and have a lead magnet and put a little bit of content into a PDF and exchange the info in that PDF for someone's email address. Facebook has their own lead forms built into it. You're gonna have more authority if you get them onto your domain because then you can retarget them. You can show them other things. You can have videos, the entire gamut of that funnel for conversion. But getting people onto your site is the first step. And I think that social is a little cheaper than pay per click on something like a search engine like Google. But you have to remember the difference between the search engine person and the social media person. Your social media person, you've done basically interrupt marketing. That's, you're watching your show on Netflix or an advertisement comes on. They weren't expecting that. They weren't looking for that. When you go to a search engine and you're doing pay per click marketing, you're actually matching this person's search intent with a service or with info. So someone could search for homes for sale in Louisville, Kentucky, and you could have an ad that displays based on that search. So your pay-per-click ads should have a higher intent and should be a higher conversion. And more than likely, you're going to pay more for them as well because of that.
Yeah, I've always heard it said, social media is rented space, and your domain is like your permanent home base.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. I could sit here and spend hours. I'd geek out with you. But I think that's a great advice for somebody that's doing it. One other question I do want to ask a follow up is, a lot of people think that the online thing happens overnight. This is probably something that's been a journey for you. You're constantly working on it over a period of time, correct?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you either spend time or money working on it. It's not a set it or forget it. The algorithm is constantly moving and it's just like any kind of other race. The other agents, other entities, are also working on theirs. So no one's standing still. You're either powering the motor or you're drifting, with the current. And sometimes someone can overtake you if you're not continuing to do the work. So you either have to continue to invest or continue to put in the time one way or another. I will say that, it's like anything with momentum. Once you're going, it's easier to keep going. So it's getting that momentum and actually getting the process started. And similar to, I think, video, we were talking about the fact that I have some kids. My girls watch YouTube videos. I don't know if your listeners have kids that watch videos. I've literally seen some of these kids in these videos, and there's like a 10-year span, and my kids are watching the videos within a span of 6 months. I've seen these kids grow up in these videos, and people are still watching these videos from 10 years ago. So once you create something, it basically lives forever. And that's the benefit of it. You do have that leverage.
Yeah, I love that. And YouTube's owned by Google, so that's a good thing.
Yep.
Um, That's great. I appreciate you sharing this, and I know that if you're out there listening, that you could dive deeper into this, but at least you know where a good place to start. It's a big topic, but you have a place to start now. I want to jump in finally to an event that you have coming up, and that's Real Estate Distilled. Tell our audience about that.
Yeah, so Real Estate Distilled is an annual conference that my wife and I host here in Louisville, Kentucky. So we lean into what we have, which is bourbon tourism. So we get really, cheeky with our themes. We invite people to be thirsty for knowledge. We have people come in. We do 2 or 3 days of content, and a lot of our speakers are other agents that are in the trenches doing the work every day. So very seldom do we actually bring in like a speaker who is on a circuit, or something along those lines. Most of our speakers are real estate agents that are actually doing the work, and they come in and share what's working in their business. So we basically kind of started that because I didn't have a conference to attend that I thought was providing a lot of value. And Louisville as a city, we've got hotel rooms that are pretty close to $150 a night instead of like 300 or 350 like a lot of cities. And again, we're not paying a lot of money to speakers. We definitely work with our speakers and we try to get people that are doing the work into town. But we're just not paying Tom Ferry, for instance, to show up just because he's Tom Ferry.
Right.
I'm not saying that Tom Ferry doesn't deliver value. I'm just saying that's not our model of the conference. We're really trying to put together smart people into the same room and then letting the community build up and work from there. So, we'll have between 155 and 175 agents attend from about 25 different states. And the goal is that you met someone new that you can call up on a random Wednesday and ask that question about that domain name, or ask that question about that probate, lead conversion process that they're working on, or you're wanting to execute a first time home buyer class and you met Tiffany and Jacob and they've already done it. So, kind of building that peer mentorship. There's a concept that I was taught a long time ago about teaching from the middle. And, basically, no matter who you meet, they know something that you don't know, and they come in contact with people that don't know what they know. So even if someone's never started something, you started yesterday, you know more than they do about that topic. So you can teach someone what you know, and you don't have to be an expert in it. You just have to know more than the person you're teaching. So, really that's kind of the focus is having everyone be a teacher from the middle and building that community, building that referral database, and making those connections.
Yeah, you got me with the bourbon. So yeah, I think that's a really cool concept, and I want to ask you a couple questions on that. But I want to finish by how do if somebody hears this today and they're like, I want to be a part of that. When's the dates? How do they sign up? Where do they go?
Yeah, so if they go to realestatedistilled.com as the website, our dates are March 5th and 6th of 2025. We typically host it in the last week of February or the first week of March. We are on Instagram. We also have a Facebook group. So if you do a search for Real Estate Distilled on Facebook, you'll find the group there. There's about 2,300 agents that are in there. So we're not a ginormous group, but again, it's about the community. So it's about the interaction and the connections that you're building in there. Um, they can join that group and have conversations in there as well.
Yeah, I love this. When I was reading about the concept when we got connected, I've been a part of a big national brand, and a lot of those conferences they would sell stuff to you.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that you're putting something together. Just come and learn. We're going to help each other out, and it's going to go beyond that event. And that's what I liked about it too, and why I want to have you on the show. Is it okay if I ask you a bigger question around this?
Sure.
So from a business perspective, I get the conference perspective, I get helping each other, everything else, and I'm thinking in terms of other agents out there that may want to host an event like this.
Sure.
What is your goal, your end goal for the business, your business, Finish Line Realty, with this conference?
Yeah, so I think that's a good question, and it's also a really fair question. And I think part of it goes back to, being naive. When I approached my wife in 2018 about doing the conference, I had no idea how much work it was going to be or how consuming it was going to be. The ROI on it is horrible. And if it wasn't like we don't do it to generate revenue. So, I mean, when you look at their ticket cost, and if you've done any kind of event planning or even hosted your own wedding, you'll know that it's expensive to feed people. It's expensive to rent these, venues. They charge a gazillion dollars just for a gallon of coffee. You bring in an AV guy, you're paying for that, and then the facility wants to charge you these plus, admin fees on top of what you're already paying for those people. So we don't do it, and we don't really generate revenue from it. Without the referrals that I receive from it, it wouldn't make sense financially. So occasionally, hopefully, about 2 times a year, I'm going to get a solid referral out of this. That makes it beneficial and worthwhile for me to do. It's still, if I were to take my hours invested and give myself an hourly wage, it's about 3 pennies. So it's certainly not a good use of my time, but it's also a passion project. So I love it. Most of our attendees are, at this point, almost like family. It's my favorite, thing is having these people come into my town. I love showing off Louisville. I feel like that Louisville in the national spotlight doesn't get the props that it deserves. We are a great city. We have great restaurants. The weather here is fairly mild. The national media sometimes portrays Kentucky as this bumpkin, barefoot and pregnant, kind of country thing. And, we've got opera and, Broadway plays and, so like orchestras. We're a great town. And we're far enough north that we're not in the South. So we get all four seasons. Anyway, I'm really just proud of my city and I love showing it off. Bourbon tourism is just kind of like the icing on it. Let people come into town. We actually do a dinner as part of the conference, invite a brand in to the dinner, and the brand ambassador walks us through a tasting of two or three different expressions of the bourbon, tells their story, and then again, we're just spending that time together. We do meals at the conference as well, so lunch is part of the conference. To me, that's important because those are the opportunities where you're actually face to face with people, and it's like those forced pinballs. You're interacting, you're having conversations. It's one thing being in the same room, but it's another to have those opportunities to actually talk to each other. Um,
Yeah,
I
in a
know I
world,
rambled a lot there, so
yeah, in a world where everything's being pushed online and disconnect, and I can see the value in that being extremely enormous. So I appreciate you sharing that, both from what the attendee is going to get, and then also like what you get from it, and
yep.
the honesty of I break even, maybe, but I've got time and it's a passion project, and I think those are all things that are important when agents are considering doing events like this, just to have that knowledge base and expectation when they step into it. I think is important. So I appreciate you sharing that. Well, Scott, thank you for being on today. And if you're listening to the show and you're an agent, check out realestatedistilled.com and get the information for the upcoming event in March. I think it's something you should check out. So again, thank you, Scott.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity.